think we'll go ahead and start off with a couple of intros, helping the room understand who we are and what we do real quick. So let's start down on the other end with Mark.
How's everybody doing today? Great. We're good. I'm Mark Snyderman, as you heard, CEO of Next Point Ventures. What is that? I am a hybrid, very bizarre hybrid of a business attorney and a venture studio owner. So I'm a sort of a latter stage serial entrepreneur. I've started up about 10 different businesses in the last 5 years, all wrapped now into what I call Next Point Ventures, which is my own capital invested in startups and companies that are maybe past startup, and we do incubation, acceleration, all that kind of fun stuff. And I also happen to be a lawyer, and I do a lot of outside general counsel services for companies as well.
Awesome. I think everybody can hear me. My name is Mario. I am the founder of Paragon. Our company focuses on, it's a tech company that works in the crypto space. So we use quantitative, qualitative data to build algorithms and AI models to help traders succeed at an absurdly high rate. Personally, I started building businesses when I was 17, back in high school. This most recent venture is probably going to be the one that I focus on for the rest of my life because it's something I'm very passionate about. But yeah, definitely experienced a lot of highs and lows over the years. I'll share some of those later.
I'm Amy Gutman. I'm giving feedback. I'm an emergency physician and with a background in executive leadership in emergency medicine in the C-suite. And I'm currently the CEO of Tough Love MD, which is a company that teaches all the people who deal in millions of dollars how to use principles of science and medicine and critical care to live more physical and mental resilient life. I am the weird one in the group today. I'm the clinical person, so it's very nice to meet everybody.
My name is Nathan Pecori. I'm the founder of DriversNet. It's basically a conglomerate of companies that I started since I was 18 as a valet attendant in downtown Chicago. It's a network of driver-based services, a company that we started just in Chicago, started as just valet and parking. Grew, I lost everything, kept going, grew it to one of the biggest privately owned parking companies in downtown Chicago. And then in 2018, we started a new niche in the transportation industry, competing with truckers by sending teams of drivers into the rail yards and ports and physically driving the cars and delivering them to the dealerships. So we were the ones that saved everybody that was waiting for those cars during COVID. We came in, got them out of the rail yards and got them to the dealership. And we ended up expanding that into 17 cities across the US and Canada, working with companies like Ford, BMW, Tesla, VinFast, Lucid, and more. And then from there, we started courier services and started building businesses that align horizontally but can grow vertically together because same clientele, same things where we can market and go after businesses. And now when I approach restaurants, I have a list of services. We do shuttle services, traffic management. So anything driver-based, cleaning services is the newest service we just added. And we operate that, like I said, across the US and Canada.
Hi, I'm Aaron Trahan, the founder of Performance Mindset based in Austin, Texas. We are a high-performance business coaching organization that helps small and medium-sized businesses scale, but scale in a smarter way. We help them prioritize, focus on profitability and sustainable growth. I'm a big believer that long-term sustainable growth is always more valuable than just rapid expansion. Leadership and the opportunity to lead happened much earlier in my career than I ever would have expected. As a 23-year-old kid, I was asked to step in and temporarily take charge of a $100 million business. And if I'm telling the truth here, I'm quite confident the leadership team at the time thought, let's throw the kid in there until we find a more qualified replacement for the role for full time. But I had a different idea. I knew that this could be a springboard moment for my career, and I took full advantage of it. I wanted to perform at such a level that it forced leadership's hand to keep me in the role full time, and luckily that's what happened. But the backdrop of that was I was extraordinarily fortunate to be in an environment that valued, recognized, and rewarded execution. And I learned very early on in my leadership journey that ideas are easy, It's execution where the magic happens. And as the story goes, I eventually found myself as a senior executive of the company, a member of the executive leadership team, now being put in charge of running $1 billion publicly traded organization by the age of 30. But if that sounds like a highlight reel, the reality was I made every single leadership mistake you could possibly imagine. And there's two big takeaways that I experienced during that leadership journey that I still use today and I still use to help my clients. And it's number one, I learned you can't scale a team, organization, or a business over the long run faster than you're able to scale yourself as a leader. I think we all know this. Leadership is an infinite game. There's no finish line. We all have to keep learning and evolving and growing as leaders. And then number two, I learned that you should never grow a business faster than your ability to manage it. The graveyard's full of businesses that grew too fast and ultimately ended up collapsing under the weight of the growing pains. And so now today, it really helped, those experiences helped shape my career to where after I left the corporate world, joined a few startups, built some things from the ground up, and I get to apply the wisdom and knowledge and all the scars acquired along that journey to now help businesses scale in a very smart, profitable, focused way. So that's who we are. And so I thought next, why don't we dive in? And, leadership can be such a broad term and broad phase. And so I thought it'd be great if we could just kind of go around and have the panel define how are you thinking about defining and approaching leadership. So Mark, I'll kick it back down to you.
All right, I'll start. So I say leadership is a choice. That's first, right? You have to make the choice to be a leader. And then you have to be the one that's going to take responsibility. And it's that responsibility is responsibility to enable others to succeed. That's leadership for me, right? Everybody has their own kind of like take on it. Like you said, the infinite game. I think a lot of us in the room have probably read Simon Sinek. So I think we all kind of steal from him because he has so much good stuff to say. But I think when you break it down for yourself, it's how do you see it? And for me, it's really how do you lead others? How do you bring them and give them the ability to actually succeed? And that's your job as the leader.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything you just said. I've read those books, love
Yeah.
Simon's books. I think, with leaders, it's also about having humility in who you are as a leader as well, knowing where your weaknesses are, bringing on the people that can fill those gaps for you. Early on, first business I built, I was 17, didn't know much about anything. I was just designing uniforms for sports teams. Somebody came in, they wanted to help fund it even more, and I didn't know how to bring on a partner. I was, a teenager at the time, so I literally just gave the guy the business and handed it away. And they went on to make millions of dollars growing that business because we had all the connections to all the teams. Later on, when I started my mastermind during the crypto cycle of 2020, 2021, which was great for a lot of people, plenty of people made money, I brought on a partner where, again, I knew what I knew what I was skilled at, but I didn't have certain aspects of connections and reach that others had. So I brought on a partner who built that following, hadn't monetized it. We brought a product to them, teaching them, my process for auditing crypto projects super early, buying in, knowing when to buy, when to sell. And we ended up taking that group. He handled certain aspects of it, of, bringing in the clients, making sure they had the right mindset. I handled the education part of it. That grew really successful. We ended up doing $1 million our first month in sales, and about 100 of those clients ended up becoming millionaires themselves. And this time around, the project that we're working on right now, I started it as the founder, we built the team around me, and for a majority of it, I was the CEO of the project. I was, making all the decisions in every meeting, dealing with all the stress that comes with being the CEO. And most recently, about a month and a half ago, I decided to step aside from the CEO role, realizing that one of the other members of our team, one of the other C-suite members who was operating as our COO at the time, was actually better suited to make those decisions because he had been doing that for other projects in the past. projects that have reached billions of dollars in market cap, hundreds of millions in growth revenue. So I put him in that role. I moved over to being chief of the community and realized that I'm better at leading the audience of our project more than I am at like making the connections to VC firms and all this other stuff that he's doing and those kinds of decisions. So a lot of times it's figuring out like, what am I missing? What am I, where am I not good, right? And can I put somebody else in that position that would be better suited for it? And I mean, that's one of the things that I've learned about leadership is, knowing your strengths, but also embracing the strengths of others and putting them in positions to succeed as well.
Apparently, I'm causing all the feedback. Sorry. To me, leadership is all about audacity and adaptability. In that, so I work night shifts to put in context. And in my job, I have absolutely no idea what's going to happen on a daily basis other than it will be utter chaos. A leader, when you walk into a room, and this room is full of leaders, you have to be able to identify immediately who is the leader. I've been hired for a job, 3 o'clock in the morning, gunshot to the chest comes in, which in my world is normal. You deal millions of dollars of cryptocurrency, which blows my mind, and I'm like, well, it's a gunshot to the chest. I was new. No one in the room knew who I was. And yet everyone in the room, and I'm 5'1", I can't reach the ground in these chairs. You can't see me when there's 50 people in a room, including trauma surgeons. If you've met surgeons, they're lovely people. They're not polite and they don't like to be told what to do. But it's my room. I'm the head of the bed. And when you come into a room and one person steps up or steps forward and says, I know the plan, whether it's a business or a corporation, I know it's going to work because of my experience and the fact that I can turn on a dime. Every second something changes. So I'm adaptable. Functional adaptability is what I call it, but audacious enough to walk into that room and go, I am going to, in my case, open a human being's chest up and massage their heart. Somebody else, it may be, I'm going to lose my entire business, but I'm going to build it back up with $5 and convince somebody to give me $1 million to build a business. Leaders do that on a daily basis with every decision they make, whether it is life or death, because for your business, it is life or death. For your business, it is life or death. For me, it often is life or death. So that's what good leadership is to me, audacity and adaptability.
To me, like Mark said earlier, it's a choice, and it's a choice when the flame gets too hot. Who's going to step up to take that responsibility and lead the team? Who's going to be the one that's going to take the blame and willing to basically put it all on their shoulders? And that's where you'll see sometimes leaders are not, they just want it to be in that power and be in that position. But I think the quality, sometimes a lot of leaders don't want to lead, but they do it, and people almost push them to lead because they see of the way they lead by example. And they may not be the vocal person, but sometimes that's all you need is a guy who shows up every day and puts all his effort in and he leads by example. But obviously there's different type of leaders, and a lot, especially in entrepreneurship, one of the things I had to realize is I had to become a better motivator. Not everybody was going to have the motivation that I had coming in. And I created a business that expanded so quickly that I created a market president position so that I was able to expand into all these cities and give them equity into the profits in their market. So doing that wasn't enough. It also had to be me going to those markets, taking them dealer to dealer, showing them, hey, we can make sales, you can grow this market. This is, you're a managing partner in this. I'm not just managing you to operate and manage our already existing operations. I'm managing you to be the guy in this market, to grow it, to make the connections, and to grow this to as big as you want. And a lot of that took me going out there, not just telling them, but physically going dealer to dealer, showing them what you can accomplish. And it's not just wasted time and wasted effort. Everybody wants that instant gratification, and really showing that there's more to it and putting that on me, because I realized I wasn't doing that enough. I wasn't traveling to the cities. I hired them, I would work with them for a month and then check in with them, but it wasn't enough. So really analyzing, and like Mario said, what are your failure, what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, and how can you address those weaknesses by moving team members around and bringing the strengths out in them.
Leadership is one of those things that when you experience it, especially great leadership, you can feel it. And for me, when I think about leadership, I think about those times where I walk into an organization, or we walk into a restaurant, or you walk in, using a sports metaphor, locker room. I think when strong leadership is at play, it creates a culture and an atmosphere and an environment that you can feel. And so how I define leadership is around uniting people around a vision. Does everybody that you're responsible to lead, do we know where we are going? That then leads to empowerment. Once everybody knows where we're going, do they feel empowered to execute, to make the decisions, to take the action steps, or in some cases, the risk to help make progress to get there? And then third, there's the development piece. So once we know where we're going, we know what needs to be done to get there. Does the leader create an environment and a culture that helps people want to show up as their best version? Wants to get people to show up to stretch. Anybody can show up and just be status quo and go through the motions. But when I think about leadership, how that shows up to get your employees to show up to stretch to their best version, I think that's something that you can feel. It's environmental. It's the thing that pushes the organization forward. And how I see that is there's really 4 key areas that I see in leadership that either can make or break an organization. And if you see a company that's struggling to grow, oftentimes you can point back to one of these 4 areas. And unfortunately, this can't be created from the bottom up. This must be a leadership top-down initiative. Number 1 is around prioritization. Is priorities clear, or is there a large degree of priority mismanagement? Do we have too many priorities? Are they unclear? Because if they're unclear and there's ineffective prioritization, it will always lead to then scattered organizational focus. It's the leadership's job to make sure the energy and collective talent of the organization is harnessed and focused in the right areas that matter the most to the organization. That then leads to execution. If there's not clear priorities and scattered organizational focus, that will always show up in inconsistent execution. And then lastly, accountability. Is the leadership ensuring that what was committed to get done gets done by when they said or committed it was going to happen? And so I think that's something that you can feel. That's environmental. It's the part of the culture that's being built. And it's not a status quo thing. I think that absolutely has to be set, established, and enforced from a leadership level. Toss it over to you, Mark.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, hearing everybody's definition. I mean, obviously, we see a lot of commonality, which you would assume that there would be commonality. You hope there's commonality when you come to a panel and you start talking about leadership. You hope you're not saying something and everybody's looking at you like, what is that guy talking about? That happens to me a lot. But I think what's really cool is let's take these definitions that we kind of have put together and talk about areas where we've succeeded or failed. Obviously, everybody likes to hear failures because we all learn from failure, but sometimes the success can be really good too. So let's start with Mario.
I mean, mine's kind of crazy. You guys got to hear a little bit about it earlier. I'll talk about some of the failures I had early on. Last cycle, when I first got into crypto, first of all, don't trust anybody who tells you get into crypto or buy this coin. I learned that very quickly on my first trade. Yeah, a buddy of mine said, "Hey, buy this. It's going to go to the moon." I bought it, put $5,000 in. We had just had a baby. My wife and I had just had a baby. Put in a lot of our money, almost all our money, and it disappeared in about 16 minutes, from $5,000 to about $100. I ended up taking that 100 and turning $80 of it into about 58 million over the course of 15 months during that cycle, which was incredible. I ended up taking a lot of people on that journey with me, getting into projects super early. But I took that failure of losing all our money, which you can't, I couldn't just back off and be like, okay, I lost, I guess I better step away. I'm kind of a person where, like, if I feel like I failed at something, I'm gonna just attack that thing until I succeed at it. I spent 2 weeks just locked up in my office. Literally, I would sleep in my chair in that office and only leave to eat. But spent 2 weeks just learning everything I could about blockchain, auditing, tracking wallets, tracking money. I could have probably worked for the IRS at some point if I wanted to, just tracking funds. But use that skill set to then turn that loss into, a skill set that I could use then to make money, and guaranteed that that never happened to me again. Taught it to a lot of other people, but I think, how we deal with failure, if you step away from failure and it's something that you really see an opportunity in, and you fail at it, and you decide to step away from it, I feel like a lot of people miss opportunities doing that. When I reached that peak of 58 million, though, the following, you get into like a euphoria. You see the big number, you're like, oh my God, my life's set. On a Monday morning, after I reached that peak, this was May 9th, 2022. I remember, 8:30 a.m. I lost 34 million in an hour, just gone. This was when the Terra Luna collapse happened in crypto, and then a lot of stuff happened in 2022. Everybody's going to jail during that year. But that failure as well was kind of crazy, because not only was it me, I mean, a lot of people that I had brought into crypto experienced the same thing that same day. And everybody in crypto experienced the same thing that day. A lot of people lost a lot of money. Hundreds of billions were wiped out of the market. And we took that experience and we're like, okay, where's the opportunity now? Now that trading is no longer profitable because we're in a bear market, we pivoted. We learned liquidity farming. We learned how to put the rest of our money that we had still left over to use during that market, and built other skill sets knowing what we knew. And I think that's another key thing, is pivoting when you experience a loss like that, pivoting to something else within the same space, usually because you've already built up that skill set, pivoting to something else. And we've built out systems over those years, 2022, 23, 24. We built out systems to help us succeed with using tools and automations. That way we're not because we were doing everything manually. But yeah, no, I mean, success and failure kind of go hand in hand, right? A lot of times success is on the other side of failure. If you use it as a teaching lesson and not as a stepping waypoint. Can I jump in and ask a follow-up question?
On that, because that loss in the span of an hour
Yeah.
would send a lot of people to go find the exact opposite thing to do and like run for the hills. And so I'm just curious, whenever you first told us the story, what was that internal story like? Because it would have been easy to just leave it, go start something different. But what was it that you were telling yourself to say, slow it down, we're going to figure this out, we're going to learn from it and keep going? What was that internal story?
I mean, at the time, when I saw it happening, I was at a red light, dropping my kids off at school at 8:30 in the morning. So I just had to pull over and be like, kids, we're going to be late today because I got to see what the heck's going on. I thought there was a glitch. I thought something had happened. For me, it was, you got here, and I didn't get there by luck. I didn't get there like in one shot. It was 6 plays back to back. Each one took me went from 80 to 40K. Then took 5 of that, split that across a few other projects, turned that 5 into 300K in the span of about a month and a half. That's when I started teaching others, because I was documenting everything online. So I had a process. I didn't get there by accident. A lot of people get lucky in crypto where they buy one project, they get rich off of it, and they're like, I'm set for life. This was 6 plays back to back. So that 300 turned into $1 million, that $1 million turned into about 13, and then that 13 turned into 58. So I knew that I could bounce back because I had a system. And again, it wasn't, if you get there by luck, you just give up, right? You just walk away because you're like, I don't know how to repeat what I just did. So I'm just going to step away. But also, if I gave up, everybody else would have given up as well, and because we built this mastermind of like 200 people, and a bunch of them have become millionaires by this point. And if I just stepped away, they would have been like, oh, I guess it's really bad now. I got to step away, and everybody would just panic and run. So it was like, all right, let's pivot. What else? What else can we do? But at that, I think when you experience a loss that much, one, I still had plenty of money left over. You know, you go from 58 to 24, you're not broke. But it was, I think a lot of people would see that and be like, where can I find the nearest bridge? You know, for me, it was like, that's okay. We move on, you know, keep an even, you know, even temperament, stay even keeled, and just find the next opportunity. And you kind of need that in crypto. Because I know in business, like, what's the statistic? Like 90%, 95%, 80% of businesses fail. In crypto, 99.999% of crypto projects fail. There's hundreds of tokens launching every hour. Most of them go to zero within the first hour or so, because they don't gain traction. They're launched by scammers who are just trying to extract money from the market. That's the nature of the space. So I know that I'm operating in a space with a high failure rate, and somehow I found a way to win. So knowing that, it gave me confidence that I could do it again, and have managed to do it again. And to Nate's point, that he was talking about, when you're a leader, like, and you have that heat on you. I mean, I've been attacked by more people than I can count. I've had death threats. When you operate in the crypto space and everybody's anonymous, like, death threats are dime a dozen. I've had people show up to my house with guns at like 4 a.m. I've had property stolen. And I'm doxxed, like, everybody knows my name in our groups and in the projects I've been in. And that happens. When everybody's losing money, they want to find somebody to blame, right? Like, you told me to get into crypto, you told me this was safe, blah, blah, blah. I dealt with this in one of the projects I was in, which was called Floki. Some of you may know it. It's a pretty big crypto project. Last cycle went from 4 million market cap to 3.5 billion. I was part of that team for the whole way through. And that project dealt with so much hate from day one, because it's a volatile space. Things go up and down 80, 90% all the time. I was in charge of the community during that time, and I honestly thrived on the heat, because I knew that I could use my knowledge, my experience, and the blockchain, which is transparent. Anybody can follow it, right? Nothing's hidden on the blockchain. I could use all that to defend the project, to show people evidence that, like, other projects may be scamming, but we're solid from the early days. And I thrived on that heat, because I was like, I'm a master at this. I'm an expert at this. There's nothing they can throw at me that I can't defend. And I think you got to get to that point where, like, you build your company, you build what you're an expert at, so solid, right? And so where you're the foremost person on this thing, that any attack that comes at you, you can defend. And we ended up taking that project. We dealt with heat. It went from 50 million to 12 million and stayed there for like a week and a half, 2 weeks. And everybody was, coming for our heads. And I just used, 12, 15 hours a day, every day on voice chat with the community, calming everybody down, educating. And again, when it went to 3 billion, I got a whole lot of thank yous, but along the way, it was a whole lot of, I'm going to find where you live. So I think, as a leader, you got to thrive on that heat and put yourself in positions where you're able to handle it and to use it and thrive in it, and not put yourself in a position where you can't handle it. Also, don't dox yourselves if you go into crypto. It's a bad move. Yeah, go ahead. Did you have anything about that?
Oh, no.
Okay.
Mine does not involve losing $34 million, but so sort of on a smaller level, I had been made associate director of an emergency department and had only small leadership experiences before that. And the chief medical officer of the hospital system, a very big hospital system, came to me and said, so the hospital is failing, patients are unhappy, and all the doctors hate each other. I need you as your project to fix this. And I'd been an assistant director for about a week at that point. Okay. The hospital is losing millions of dollars at that point. And if anyone's been in a hospital, you know that if you've ever had more than one service consulting on you, the surgeon doesn't talk to the medicine doctor, doesn't talk to the nursing, and mistakes are made. Patients were actually getting harmed. All right, how do we fix this? So I found the biggest asshole I could, who was an intensive care doctor. Everyone hated. Now, ICU never plays nice with the emergency department, as we all know. Or maybe you don't, and that's okay. I'm going to make friends. And I was a bull in the china shop. I'd been a firefighter EMT for years before I was an emergency room doctor. That's where I have my charming personality from. So I approached this guy, and I'm like, I am going to out-asshole you. I'm going to have you earn some respect here. And it worked. And then we figured out, how do we make each other's teams work better? The emergency department didn't understand what the ICU does. The ICU doesn't understand what the emergency department does. Okay, how do we make that better? And we realized every hospital department had absolutely no idea what the other hospital departments do. And so when you don't, it's always like, my job is so much harder than yours. You don't understand me. Cool. Well, guess what? We're all going to play in each other's sandboxes. We developed a program where our nurses would rotate on the medicine floor, and the ICU, and dialysis, which, if you know anything about medicine or nursing, these don't go together. You can't pass pills in a med-surg unit the same you would in an ICU. New equipment, new meds. Oh, we got to train. Hey, you know what? You know what else we don't have? We don't have a continuing education program at our hospital. Well, let's just do that, shall we? So the hospital system, big hospital system, and we're like billion-dollar hospital system in New York and Hudson Valley upstate. They're like, well, how much do you need? I said, I need about 10 million. Been a director at this point, maybe about 6 months, and I was fully a director. And they said, $10 million, how long is it going to take? I said, well, probably a few years. It's like, how about 6 months? And we'll give you 5. But if you succeed, we'll double that. Cool. And oh, by the way, your patient outcome scores have to improve as well as your patient survival. Oh, sure. Excellent. I can do that. And we did, because I slept in my office and I worked nights so that during the day I could administrate. We developed a continuing ed program, not just for our hospital, but for the enormous hospital, the residency training hospital, that had their own program. And our patient satisfaction scores skyrocketed. Patients didn't want to go to the city hospital anymore. They wanted to come to our hospital. We were able to recruit specialties that we had never had at our hospital. The nurses were happy. The unions were happy because the nurses were happy. And guess what? When more money came in, everyone got raises. Everyone got more benefits. And the surgeons still didn't necessarily play nice with all the other doctors, and the ED didn't always play nice, but we talked collaboratively. And I got my 10 million briefly until the hospital system was taken over by another hospital system. But it taught me that sometimes being that bull in a china shop to a point is helpful, as long as you recognize that the goal of everyone in that room, all right, we all got it. We're all ballsy. That's cool. We're going to sit down. We're going to make this better, because the end goal is going to be patient outcomes and survival. We all like our money as physicians. But ultimately, even the ones who are at the top of the asshole chain, and I'm sorry if I'm using offensive language, night shift, we all want our patients to do well. And so I kind of guilted people into that, and it really worked well. We actually were able to statistically prove that our patients' outcomes were twice what they were before we initiated that initiative. And so that, to me, was like the best part. I made some friends too, which was good. And then you take those successes and move on. But that, to me, was a helpful thing.
For me, failure was defined early to me by my football coach in high school. It was, man's greatest fear is the fear of failure. But it's the men that quickly realize the bill of regret that they'll receive if they don't risk it and chase those things. Those are the men that will be successful in any endeavor that they choose to face or go after in life. And with me, I mean, that started at a young age. I mean, I watched my father fail in business. And it's kind of the way you respond. I mean, failure is never going to go away. I'm still at the point, I got calls last week where we lost massive contracts. And it's always going to change, and it's always going to be a part, whether you're a parent, business owner, whatever it is, failure is going to be a part of it. And mastering it by understanding that to reach success, failures are those stepping stones. You have to fail, but not only fail, because you can practice all day. And I think this is what set Tom Brady apart and a lot of other people. And like Mario said, I mean, you use that energy, you fail, you feel that failure, you use that pain, and you use it to build that fire that you have to motivate you, like he did. He locked himself in a room and he studied crypto. This is never going to happen again. And you use that. And that's a key that a lot of entrepreneurs have, is that ability to take that pain and fuel it. But also, the thing that Tom Brady and a lot of people do is they analyze it. They don't just go on and they keep practicing. They go back and they watch the tape. The best speakers in the world, they analyze their speeches after. And I was taught this as well. So after this, I'll be analyzing every part of this tape, just to see what I said, what I could have said better. And I really think if you understand that process of failure, I mean, there's nothing that you can't do. And you just understand, yeah, I'm going to fail because I'm trying to achieve something great. And that's a part of the process, it's a part of the journey. And like I said, for me, that started at a young age. My father had a lot of business, came in, immigrated in from Jordan, and he had property in the city, got some bad partnerships, and he lost everything. But for me, he should have never gave up, and that's kind of what I learned from him. But it also became my why. Because if you're an entrepreneur, you're not becoming successful unless you have a strong enough why. And for me, it was watching my father. I mean, sometimes he was laughed at by some of my uncles who were very more successful. And for me as a kid watching that built that fire in me. Like, my dad sacrificed everything. And if I don't put it to achieve more, then what kind of son am I? And what kind of father would I be to the next son? I feel like that's the biggest thing in a father-son relationship. The son needs to realize one day that all the pain that their father and parents have bared, and now taking it on them to be like, you know what, mom and dad, relax. I'm going to take care of you for once, for everything that you did to me, and putting that on to reach that greatness and being the guy on the wall for the next generation to really establish. A lot of us came from low-income families. I really wouldn't trust a business partner that's had a perfect life. I wouldn't trust them because it's just, when the fire's really hot, what are you going to do? You really going to be there right next to me with your sword ready in hand to go to battle? Or are you going to run away and hide? And I've dealt with this. I've had 3 concussions. One in 2010 playing football that kind of upended my football career. And back then, concussion studies weren't what they were. So I went down a downward spiral, depression, suicidal ideations, and I attempted for no reason. I had a perfect life. I was an athlete. I was a sophomore up on varsity. And it was a game where they used to call me the suicide bomber because of the way I hit. So I was a sophomore up on varsity. I knew I was on kickoff return. I had to run full speed and blow up their all-state linebacker. I loved it. But we were down 49-0 by half, and it was 8 full-speed collisions, and I didn't back off on a single one of them, and I didn't know where I was. So that created a downward spiral where all these things happened, and for 4 or 5 years, I didn't know why I felt that way. And then I finally started getting my priorities right. I started working downtown as a valet attendant while attending college, and I just knew that I wanted more in life, because after I finally recovered from the post-concussion syndrome I didn't know I had, I realized, like, all the things growing up and all the things that I saw, that fire that was in me, I don't want to live an average life. I want to be able to travel the world. I want to be able to take care of my parents and everything that they sacrificed. So for me, like I said, learning that from my father and then just taking that and applying that to everything I do and anything you do in life. And that's how you master failure.
There's a part of that message that I really love, and I think it carries over to an experience that I had, is that to continuously improve at anything, you have to have feedback. You know, as Nate mentioned about going back and watching the tape of today, like, where could I get better? What do I need to do? Where are those areas of improvement? You cannot have enough high quality feedback loops. And the experience of a failure that I had early on in my business career was I forgot that for a moment. You know, sometimes we don't realize that our current success can actually be the very thing that prevents our future success. And as I mentioned in my intro, I got a lot of leadership responsibility at an early age. And when you start listening to the people telling you how great you are, how well you're performing, how smart you are, you know, that little voice inside your head that's coming from the comfort zone is going to start telling you a lot of very strange narratives saying, hey, you've arrived, you've made it. You can take your foot off the accelerator now. Let's coast a little bit. And I started listening to that voice. And when I did, I stopped learning, I stopped growing, I stopped collecting feedback, and it started to show up in my performance. And so I had to get back to growth mode, leave the comfort zone. And for me, it took some hotshot firm coming into our company doing 360-degree feedback for me to see it on paper of kind of what my teams were saying, what kind of leader I was. And it was a big soul-crushing moment of you thinking you're leading a certain way, but then seeing and listening that it's coming across totally different. I was no longer doing the things that made me a great leader. I thought I was better than I was. I stopped collecting feedback on how to get even better. And back to those 4 key areas of leadership that I mentioned, when you think about the number 1 key performance indicator for any leader, all arrows point back to some form or fashion communication. A leader has to be an effective communicator for their teams and organizations to be able to set the priorities, to get the organization focused, to be able to help everyone understand what execution success looks like, and then to be able to hold people accountable. So I lost that. Luckily, I had the right feedback, even though it may have been forced feedback coming in, that helped me realize I've got to get back into growth mode, and I will never forget the quality of high quality feedback loops on how it can drive continuous improvement.
I want to piggyback on what you just said there about the feedback loops, because I think bringing somebody from the outside to look at what you're doing, basically where you're succeeding, where you're falling short. I assume everybody here has family members, spouses, loved ones. I think finding a good partner, whether that's in business or in life, somebody that on that feedback loop, right? Because it can't just be internal. You got to get outside feedback. On that feedback loop, knowing when to push you and when to just support you based on how you're doing in life is super important. Because when I first lost that $5,000, that was everything we had. We had just had a baby. That was all our money, And when I went to go tell her, and I was choked up, felt like crap. And I was like, I don't know how, but I'll make it back, I promise. She didn't go into, you idiot, why would you do this, blah, blah, blah. She didn't go in attack mode. She went, I trust you. I know you'll do it. Do what you have to do, right? And then she just left me to my own devices for that 2 weeks. Took care of the baby while I just focused on how to make our money back. And then there's other times where I'm making mistakes and she's like, you can do better than this. You're not behaving in the way that I would expect you to be, or who I want our daughters to have a dad modeling. So it's finding those people that know when to push you, when to support you, and getting that good mix. And I got lucky with my wife. So I found that.
He forgot the best part of that story, because I've heard it before. And he walked in the room ready to dip and dodge because his wife is Latina, and he was expecting to slip her right to the face. So he was very happy when it didn't happen.
I thought I had heat coming my way, but no, I was surprised. And that's when I knew, that's when I knew, I'm with this woman for life.
Mark, you have an experience?
Yeah, so I'll flip to a success, because we've done a lot of failures, and I have plenty of those. But I'll actually do a success, because it's one. The hard thing about success is identifying actually why was it successful, why did it go the way it went, why did it go well, and I can identify this one. I can identify well because I've had a lot of time to think about it. I ran a engineering and IT services firm for about 10 years. I was a corporate lawyer. They brought me in, and I kind of learned the business really fast. We were doing federal contracting. I learned the business super fast. Like, hey, why don't you run this company? And I'm like, I don't know, I'm a lawyer, what do I know? I don't know anything about how to run the company. So, I immediately went into education mode. I signed up for Notre Dame MBA. I went into full mode, right? Because I like to learn. So that was the easy part. And I figured, I learned what I needed to do, right, to be the leader of the company. And we were at about 75 employees. I saw 300 in my sights, right? And the owners of the company were like, you're out of your mind. We've never grown like that. We've been the same company for 15 years, this is what we do. Don't worry about it. And I said, well, if I can do this, then this is what I get, right? Negotiated my deal. and went down a path and drew it on my board. I had a whiteboard in my office that everybody knew was there because everybody was in my office every day because that's what you do when you're the run the company, right? You're the revolving door of people, right? So I had the entire plan on the board for 5 years of what we were going to do and how we were going to get there year by year, quarter by quarter, how many employees we were going to be at, how much revenue we were going to be at. I had acquisitions targeted out. I had it all. It was a complete map with full transparency. And the organization was a family-run business that had never had any transparency whatsoever. It was as opaque as could be. Nobody knew anything about what was going on ever. Nobody ever understood what a decision was. And I came in and just changed the entire culture. And we hit all the targets. We exceeded all the targets. We flew. Like the company we did 26% compound annual growth rate for 5 years straight.
Wow.
Like it was absolutely out of control. Like to the point where we didn't have the infrastructure to support what we built. And like you said, sometimes you grow too fast, then you got to figure out how to support that. So I had to spend the next few years rebuilding the infrastructure. So, but you can, what did I learn from it? What I learned as the leader was transparency and enabling the people around me. I don't say that, I grew the company. I shepherded that growth. The company was stuck. It was never going to do that without somebody to say, here's how you get there, and here's what you're going to need to do. So I think, sometimes it's just learning what you're best at. I think, each one of you have shown that in the panel is you're really good at that self-awareness piece, and that's a piece we didn't define as part of leadership, but I think we defined it in the panel today.
100%. Without doubt.
Absolutely. Well, we got 2 minutes left, so let's take a question or two. There's one back there.
Hello. I think a lot of fascinating stories. I was just curious. I mean, as leader, like you guys have all seen failures in different modes. When they're having success, really, there's not a lot of problems. Your team's functioning well, everything is going fine. But when you see a failure, one thing as experts in your field, that you know how to solve the problem. But you have a team of different varied experience and expertise, they don't probably see. So you actually see that half of them might hatch out to your plan, half of them might say, you know what, I'm going to run for the hills. But I'm just curious, when you experience failures, how did your team react and facilitate moving that failure to a success? And how did you facilitate your team to approach that problem in the right manner?
I'll jump in and take a stab at that one first. I think it really comes down to mindset. And a failure is not the end of the day. Anytime you're stretching, anytime you're going above and beyond, anytime you're trying to do something that may have not been done before in any organization, I think it was mentioned several times here, failure is not the opposite of success. Failure is part of the journey towards success. If you're not failing, you're not stretching. And I think when you can align the team around that message ahead of time, failure doesn't become some brick wall that you can't get over and then everybody wants to quit because we failed. No, failure is an incredible teacher as long as the organization can be great students to learn from it, recalibrate, reflect on why the failure happened, and then get better from that failure the very next day. And I think there's a dramatic difference with an organization that's able to harness and learn from failure versus an organization that tries to avoid failure at all costs. Not saying you need to try to fail, but it is par for the course. You want to minimize it, but it's usually a result of something happening that you didn't expect. What did we learn from that? How do we get better from that? What will we start doing differently tomorrow that we weren't doing yesterday?
If I just may add, so when a patient dies, it's not necessarily failure. Sometimes they will. And one of the things that I do in the emergency department that I also do in the corporate world, when we have had everyone in that room, different skill sets, it may have been the first day on the job, they may be a student, they may be an EMT, respiratory. We have 50 people in that room who have tried desperately to bring someone back to life, and we fail. Sometimes the family's in the room. I'm the head of the bed, and the last thing I say is, does anyone have anything to add? Because I want every single person in that room to feel that they contributed. I own it. The wins are mine, the fails are mine, but I want everyone in the room to feel compelled that they are part of that process. You do the same in business. Does anyone have anything to add? Because leaders are ultimately have to be humble enough to go, I just don't know enough. Maybe I couldn't fix it. That's how I approach it, because maybe someone does have something. Maybe it didn't fix it right then, but maybe it's going to fix the next one. And when you pull everyone in that company or in the emergency department, I think you get ownership from all the people on your team into your leadership. And that's how I approach that.
All right. I think we're getting dragged off the stage here. So thanks, everybody. We'll be here.